Road trips have a way of pulling people closer, windows down, playlists loud, the world stretching endlessly ahead. Two young couples from Colorado, Daniel and Kira, and their longtime friends Marcus and Elise, the 2008 summer road trip was supposed to be nothing more than a 4-day escape. A break from work, from routine, from everything that felt heavy. They packed lightly, planned loosely, and told their families they'd be back by Monday. But Monday came. Then Tuesday. Then an entire week. And no one heard a single word from any of them again. Their phones stopped pinging cell towers somewhere near the Nevada-Utah border. Their bank cards went dead. There were no calls for help, no sightings, no signs of distress. It was as if the highway itself swallowed all four of them. At first, police treated it like a simple case of a road trip gone wrong. Maybe they'd taken a detour, gotten stuck, lost signal. But the families insisted something was deeply off. These were responsible adults. They were traveling in a sturdy SUV. They had maps, chargers, and extra supplies. And even if something unexpected had happened, for people don't just disappear. A massive search followed, state troopers, helicopters, volunteers combing the desert highways. But after months of effort, the case went cold. Investigators whispered that they'd likely never find answers. Then, 4 years later, a drone hobbyist testing a new long-range setup captured something odd in a remote desert valley. Something metallic, something buried deep in a place no human could easily reach. When authorities arrived, they realized this valley wasn't just hiding one vehicle. It was hiding many. And somewhere among them was the couple's missing SUV. The trip wasn't planned in any serious way, just a casual idea tossed around during a Friday night dinner. Daniel and Kira had been stressed for months, caught between demanding jobs and the rising tension of trying to decide whether to move to a new city. Marcus and Elise, on the other hand, were celebrating a recent promotion and wanted to unwind before life shifted into a faster gear. So, a road trip felt like the perfect compromise. No airports, no strict itineraries, just four friends chasing long stretches of highway and desert landscapes that looked like they belonged in postcards. They left Denver on a warm July morning in 2008. The sky was cloudless, the air fresh, the SUV cleaned out and stocked with snacks, water, and a cheap camcorder Daniel insisted on bringing for memories. The plan was simple: drive through western Colorado, cross into Utah, then dip briefly into Nevada to explore a few less-traveled scenic routes before looping back. Their families all received quick, cheerful calls or texts that morning. On the road. Should be back Monday. Wish you were here. Nothing alarming. Nothing that hinted at danger. Along the way, they stopped at diners, recorded goofy videos, and sang badly to old rock songs. Elise, who was always the cautious one, kept the maps neatly folded and highlighted their progress in bright yellow marker. Marcus teased her for it, but later, even years later, people would say that detail made everything eerily heartbreaking. Because the map ended halfway through their journey. Highlighted, and then suddenly blank. Their last confirmed stop was a small gas station on the Utah-Nevada border. Surveillance footage captured all four of them laughing as they stretched their legs. Marcus went inside to grab energy drinks. Kira bought a disposable camera. Daniel stood outside inspecting the SUV's tires. Elise flipped through a stack of tourist pamphlets she'd grabbed. Everything seemed normal. Absolutely ordinary. So ordinary it made what came next feel unreal. Based on fuel records, investigators later estimated they drove west for about 2 more hours after leaving that gas station. But somewhere along that stretch of road, somewhere without cameras, without towns, without cell towers, their SUV vanished. When they failed to return Monday morning, families called their phones. Straight to voicemail. They contacted friends. No one had heard from them. Concern turned into fear when the police reported that none of their devices had connected to any towers since Saturday afternoon. The search began at dawn the next day. Authorities traced the most likely route the couples would have taken, Nevada Highway 50, sometimes called the loneliest road in America, a nickname that suddenly seemed far too fitting. Search teams drove hundreds of miles, scanning ditches, ravines, and abandoned service roads. Helicopters flew low over the desert floor. Volunteers combed dry valleys and rocky trails. But the landscape was unforgiving, vast, empty, and full of places where a single wrong turn could erase a vehicle from sight forever. Weeks went by. Then months. The families held vigils. The flyers faded in the sun. And the case slowly slipped from headlines to cold storage. No bodies. No vehicle. No clues. It was as if the road had simply opened up and swallowed all four of them whole. The official search effort lasted 73 days, longer than most missing person operations of its kind. And during that time, the families learned something horrifying about that part of the desert. People vanished there more often than anyone liked to admit. Nevada Highway 50 stretched endlessly across a landscape that was both beautiful and hostile. Jagged cliffs, sudden drop-offs, dry creek beds that looked shallow yet plunged deep into hidden ravines. For anyone unfamiliar with the terrain, a single wrong turn could send them miles off course without realizing it. Search coordinators broke the couple's possible route into grids. Volunteers, troopers, rescue teams, and even off-road groups began sweeping each grid in slow, methodical passes. They used ATVs, horseback units, and even old military Humvees borrowed for rugged terrain. But each day ended the same way: dusty boots, exhausted faces, nothing found. The FBI got involved briefly, mostly to rule out foul play. They reviewed the gas station footage, interviewed the cashier, pulled credit card records, checked for any signs the couples were being followed. Nothing. 4 young adults on a trip together, smiling, relaxed, completely unaware they were leaving behind the last known images of themselves. When search dogs were brought in, they struggled. The entire desert smelled like baked earth and wind. Scents didn't cling there. They evaporated into the air as quickly as footprints vanished beneath shifting ground. Families started offering their own theories. Maybe the SUV overheated, and they went looking for help. Maybe they'd taken a dirt road thinking it was a shortcut. But search teams explored every marked and unmarked path within 50 miles. The desert gave nothing back. What unsettled investigators the most was the complete lack of debris. If an SUV had crashed, even rolled down a hill, there should have been something: broken glass, a tire track, a shard of metal glinting in the sun. But officials found absolutely nothing. As weeks passed, the investigation grew more desperate. A private aerial search was arranged, using small planes equipped with high-resolution cameras. Pilots flew at low altitude, sweeping wide arcs across the desert. The footage was reviewed frame by frame. Again, nothing. The families refused to give up. They camped near search sites, handed out flyers to travelers, put up billboards along state roads. They pleaded with law enforcement to keep the case active. But with each passing month, hope began dissolving into the vast silence of the desert. Eventually, resources dried up. Search teams were reassigned. The volunteers stopped coming. And the official statement became painfully familiar. There is no evidence of where the missing individuals might have gone. By early 2009, the case file was quietly moved to the cold case division. The families kept calling, kept demanding updates, but the answer was always the same: no leads, no sightings, no new information. People whispered strange theories. Some blamed human traffickers. Others insisted there was a hidden road out there, one that never appeared on maps. And a few locals, the ones who knew the desert best, said the land itself had places where cars could disappear forever. One thing everyone agreed on: that stretch of Nevada was not meant to be traveled without caution. But no one, not the investigators, not the families, not even the locals, had any idea just how close they'd been to the truth. A truth waiting down in a valley no one ever thought to search. A valley that held more than the couple's SUV. A valley that had been taking lives for decades. 4 years passed. Seasons changed. Families aged in ways grief forces people to age. Quicker, heavier, quieter. The disappearance of the two couples had become one of those cases locals mentioned only in passing, usually with a shake of the head and a quiet, "Terrible thing, never found him." Then came August 2012. A tech hobbyist named Raymond Cooper had driven out into the desert to test a custom-built long-range drone he'd been working on for months. He was a quiet man, a retired electrician who found comfort in tinkering with gadgets. His plan that day was simple: test the drone's new battery upgrade, capture some aerial footage, and go home. He launched the drone from a small turnout off Highway 50. The sky was clear, the kind of still, unforgiving blue the desert is famous for. Raymond watched the drone climb higher and higher, its camera stabilizing as it tilted toward the rugged expanse of cliffs and valleys ahead. He flew it over hills, jagged rock fields, and dry riverbeds. Nothing unusual. Nothing interesting. But then, as the drone dipped over the edge of a deep, crooked valley, the live feed flickered, and something metallic flashed on the screen. Raymond squinted. Rewind. Zoom. Still frame. There it was. A vehicle roof, half buried in sand and debris. But it wasn't alone. The drone's camera tilted slightly as he adjusted the controls, revealing another vehicle a short distance away. And then another. And another. Like a graveyard of metal, rusted skeletons of cars scattered along the bottom of the valley, nearly swallowed by time and sand. Raymond's heart thudded. He didn't know what he was looking at, but he felt it was wrong. Very wrong. He took several clear still frames, marked the coordinates, and immediately drove back toward town, hands shaking the entire way. By the time he reached the sheriff's office, he was pale and drenched in sweat. "Sir, you need to see this," he said, voice trembling. Deputies gathered around as he showed them the footage. Silence fell over the room. The valley wasn't supposed to exist, not officially. It wasn't on maps. Not satellite ones, not geological ones, not old surveyor files. It was an unregistered cut in the earth, likely formed decades ago by erosion and ignored by everyone because it lay far off any regular path. Within hours, a search team was assembled. They followed the coordinates in off-road trucks, then on foot when the terrain became too steep. The hike down took nearly an hour, the slope loose and treacherous. At the bottom, the air felt dead. Still, like the valley had trapped not just cars but sound itself. Deputies spread out, approaching the rusted hulls one by one. Some vehicles were mangled beyond recognition. Others were strangely intact, as if they'd slid in slowly instead of crashing violently. And then one deputy shouted, "Over here!" Half buried under a mound of sand, debris, and dried brush was an SUV. A silver 2000s model. Right make. Right color. The missing couple's vehicle. The VIN matched minutes later. The families were notified that evening, 4 years after their loved ones vanished without a trace. But the discovery raised a chilling question. How did the SUV get there, and why were there so many other cars? The valley wasn't just a hidden place. It was a trap. One that had been claiming victims long before 2008. The recovery team worked in tense, focused silence. The SUV was wedged between two boulders, its front end crushed inward as though it had nosedived before being swallowed by the shifting earth. Sand filled the wheel wells. The windshield was cracked in a spiderweb pattern. But the body of the vehicle was intact enough to tell one thing immediately. This wasn't a violent crash. There were no skid marks. No signs of high speed. No explosion. It looked more like the ground had given out beneath them. The valley walls rose sharply on all sides, creating a natural funnel where any vehicle that strayed too close to the edge could easily plunge down. The more investigators studied the area, the more stunned they became. The valley wasn't off the map by oversight. It was nearly invisible from above, a shadowed crease in the earth camouflaged by ridges and light distortion. Getting the SUV open took effort. Sand had compacted into the door seams, and the heat had warped sections of the frame. When deputies finally pried the back door loose, a gust of trapped air escaped, a stale, suffocating breath from 2008. Inside, the SUV looked frozen in time. A cooler lay on its side. A bag of chips still sealed. Elisa's neatly organized map binder sat on the back seat, the yellow highlighted path stopping abruptly at the point they were last seen. A digital camera was wedged between seats. And in the front cup holder sat Marcus's last purchased energy drink, still capped. But what gripped investigators most wasn't what was there, it was what was missing. No remains. No torn clothing. No blood. It looked as though the four adults had simply stepped out. Walked away. Vanished again, but this time, from inside the SUV. The doors were unlocked. No windows had been broken from the inside. There were no signs of panic, scrambling, or animal interference. On the driver's seat floorboard, deputies found something strange. A small handheld flashlight, it switched still in the on position, but dead from age. It suggested the couples had been conscious after the fall. They'd used the light. They'd tried to see. Near the center console lay Daniel's camcorder, the one he'd brought for memories. When an evidence tech flipped the screen open, the device blinked and sputtered, its battery long dead. But inside was a memory card. That discovery would later become the single most important piece of evidence in the entire case. As the sun began sinking behind the cliffs, investigators continued combing the valley floor. The other cars told their own grim stories, some decades old, some nearly stripped by heat and erosion, some so crushed it was impossible to know who had once been inside them. But none had been searched as thoroughly as this one. None had a missing persons case tied to it. None had four families waiting for answers. By dusk, the SUV was hoisted out of the valley using a complicated system of cables, pulleys, and a helicopter lift. Dust filled the air. Observers watched silently as the vehicle rose, an artifact of tragedy suspended against the darkening sky. Back at the county impound, under harsh fluorescent lights, investigators connected the camcorder to a power source. The screen flickered. Lines of static. A brief hiss of audio. Then a single timestamp appeared. July 12, 2008, 9:47 p.m. Someone had been recording the night they vanished. And whatever was on that footage might explain what forced four adults to leave their only shelter in the middle of a deadly valley. The room was silent when investigators pressed play. The camcorder's screen glowed faintly, its old hardware struggling to revive a moment frozen in time. A few pixels flickered. The image jolted. Then it steadied enough to reveal a dim interior, shadows, dust particles floating, and four familiar voices overlapping in panic. The timestamp blinked again. July 12, 2008, 9:47 p.m. At first, the footage showed only darkness. Then someone, likely Daniel, turned the lens toward himself. His face was streaked with sweat and dirt. He was breathing hard. The beam of a flashlight shook in his other hand, the glow bouncing off the SUV's interior. We slid down. I don't know how far. The car's stuck, Daniel whispered, voice trembling. The phones aren't working. We can't climb back up. Behind him, Kira's voice rose, frantic, breaking. Just keep the camera on. If someone finds this we need. The screen lurched violently as the camcorder slipped, clattering against the console before being grabbed again. Now it pointed toward the SUV's rear seat, where Marcus and Elise were huddled together. Elisa's hands were scraped raw, covered in dust. Marcus was tying a strip of fabric around her arm, likely from an injury during the fall. It's too steep, Marcus said, his tone unervingly calm. The walls are crumbling. Every time we try to climb, the sand collapses. We have to stay in the car, Elise added, voice trembling. Someone will come tomorrow. They have to. But the next thing the footage showed suggested they already sensed tomorrow might not come. A low rumble echoed outside, distant but growing. Not wind. Not rocks. Something heavier. Something that made all four of them go silent. The camera lens shifted toward the SUV window. It was too dark to see more than the empty void of the valley, but the audio captured something the investigators replayed multiple times. A slow grinding sound, like metal shifting against earth. "What is that?" Kira whispered. "Another car?" Daniel replied. "Maybe someone else went off the road." They all listened. Another rumble. Then a faint, muffled crash. Then silence. The valley had taken another vehicle that night. The footage cut to static, then resumed minutes later. Now the couples were outside the SUV. The camcorder shook wildly, as if someone was running with it. Flashlights darted across uneven ground, illuminating a slanted terrain full of loose sand and jagged rocks. "We can't stay down here," Marcus said. "If another lands on top of us." "Stop, stop!" Elise cried suddenly. The camera jerked toward her voice. She was pointing at something just ahead, a sun-bleached SUV half-buried nose first, its back end crushed as if it had fallen straight from above. The implication made Kira start sobbing. The valley wasn't just collecting vehicles. It was still collecting them. From the way the couples moved, investigators could tell they were trying to climb out. They tried digging footholds. Tried pulling themselves up using exposed roots and rocks. But everything crumbled under their weight. At one point, Daniel set the camera on a ledge to help the others. The lens caught the four of them struggling, slipping, scraping at the earth with shaking hands. And then, suddenly, a section of the slope gave way beneath Marcus. The camcorder toppled. Screams filled the audio. Sand roared like an avalanche. When the image stabilized again, the camcorder was on its side, recording only the stars above the valley. Voices were distant, strained, echoing. Then one final sentence was captured, Elisa's voice, terrified and breathless. "Someone has to find this. Please, someone find this." The screen went black. The footage ended. Investigators stared in absolute silence. There were no signs of foul play. No mysterious figures. No violence. Just four people caught in a natural death trap no one knew existed. But one question still haunted the room. If they didn't die in the SUV, where did they go? The valley remained a chilling reminder of nature's hidden dangers. A place so remote, so deceptive, that even careful travelers could vanish without a trace. Over decades, it had claimed vehicles, and, by extension, the people inside them. The discovery of the SUV finally gave the family some answers, but the footage left them with more questions than closure. No one could explain how the four adults had seemingly exited the SUV, attempting to escape the valley's deadly slope, only to vanish into the night. Their bodies were never found. The other vehicles scattered across the valley hinted at the long, haunting history of this hidden trap, yet authorities could only speculate why so many had ended up there, some decades old, some more recent. For the families of Daniel, Kira, Marcus, and Elise, the camcorder was a double-edged gift. It proved their loved ones had fought, struggled, and survived long enough to try to escape, but it also confirmed the cruel reality that the valley had claimed them all. The desert remains as it always has, beautiful, vast, and unforgiving. Modern technology, like drones, brought the lost SUV to light, but the valley keeps its secrets well. It reminds us that even today, with maps, GPS, and satellites, there are places where humans are mere visitors, where the Earth itself can become a predator. Somewhere out there, in the shadows of Nevada's rugged terrain, the Lost Four continue to haunt the stories of those who remember, a reminder that not every road leads safely home. The case remains open, and the valley continues to lure the unwary, its deadly reputation growing with every vehicle it quietly swallows.